Okay, before I jump into my paper, I wanted to show you a visualization project related to some of what I am going to be talking about. So I developed this project in processing, which is basically Java, but it's been kind of sandboxed for non-programmers to learn quickly how to approach what they do in a computational environment. I think it was originally kind of designed for artists, but I found it very useful as a language within the humanities. So this project is going to be in one of the chapters of a book I'm finishing up for Parlor Press titled Suasive Iterations. And this project is in a chapter about a new way of thinking of digital delivery, and specifically about how Microsoft's Kinect, the data coming from it can be leveraged to that end. So in immersive computing spaces, spaces in which the line between the real and the virtual can be hybridized or everted in novel ways, spaces in which the feedback from image, sound, and other ambient features affect how a participant relates to self, delivery can be a really key moment here for us as rhetors. For rhetors developing spaces like this, delivery is really radically changed. It's no longer an issue of kind of dressing your speech, dressing up language with intonation, gesture, posture, even clothing. Rather, delivery is the ability to create new experiences, new relations among participants in and with their surroundings, changing then how they think and feel, how they relate to things. We deliver them, so to speak, to a new affective relation with self and world. That, to me, is where digital delivery is within this kind of immersive computing context. So the visualization here is really a heuristic. It's meant to help you think about the ways in which you can use the data streaming from that Kinect sensor to do something innovative, do something suasive. So let's begin in the bottom right corner. I just wanted to walk us quickly through just what on earth is going on here, okay? Because it's not particularly self-explanatory, but it's obviously, it is within the, with the context of the book. So, Nathaniel, if you don't mind, yeah, I wonder if you could just kind of walk up toward the sensor, because the bottom right-hand box, okay, you'll see Nathaniel walking up there, all right. So 30 times a second, the Kinect is offering you, the digital rhetorician, 307,200 pixels of depth data. Anything in front of it is getting picked up by an infrared laser. The speed at which the light bounces back to a camera embedded right next to it on the Kinect sensor is the basis for defining the distance of any surface in front of the Kinect, okay? And then what I did in the bottom right is basically take that histogram, take that depth image and map it onto grayscale and XY coordinates. So you just kind of feel like you're seeing something that the camera might be seeing. Moving up to the top row, in the middle box, what you're seeing are the number of pixels that are lit up, so to speak. Well, actually, I'm jumping ahead. Top left corner, what you're looking at is me having chopped up the space in front of the Kinect into a 4x4 grid, which is not unlike what Kevin Brock and I did for a project called Embody Text, which was shown in a few places, including St. Louis a few years ago. So in the middle box, then, you're getting the number of pixels that are being lit up within each of those grid spaces. And the numbers that are orange in the middle, top middle box, the box that is orange in top left, that is a visualization of which area within that 4x4 grid is the most active, okay? And incidentally, I think it's worth mentioning, this depth data is ontologically flat, meaning it doesn't know that Nathaniel is human, sorry. It will just get the depth data for anything. And what I find really fascinating about that in the context of post-human rhetorics and explorations of extra subjectivity and all the other terminology related to that is that you could easily use this project so that even though Nathaniel may feel like he is the actor in front of this thing, the protagonist within this participatory environment, he may not activate enough pixels as one object within the space to do much to the project. It may require 2 people, 3 people So there's a lot of really interesting ways in which the depth data in particular enables you to do things because you get away from that human-centric view that you otherwise would be kind of entangled within, or the inertia from just how we're brought up in the West would kind of keep you from thinking about it, okay? Quickly then, because I want to get into the paper. Thanks a lot, Nathaniel, I appreciate it. So the bottom left box is, there I've just chopped up the space into 4 rows, and whichever one is orange right now is the one with the most activity. The box on the bottom right corner is a bar graph of which grid boxes have been activated the most or how many times, which could be the basis for doing something really interesting algorithmically with the way in which participation is defined within the space. And jumping up to the box top right, here in the book I talk about how, for example, by chopping up the space into a 4x4 grid, now you've got an opportunity to connect it up to a history of hypertext within rhetoric and other fields. Maybe, you know, I can use that 4x4 grid as the basis for an algorithm that moves text and image and any other kind of experience into the space based on which nodes are hit, how many times certain nodes are hit. I mean, if you think about story space and the connect, that could be kind of the mashup that's implied by that. And then that middle bottom box, I just threw some text in and showed you how you can map on the values from one data stream, like the numerical data of the depth, onto something like text, which just moves up and down and around the screen. That could be text, it could be image, it could be sound, etc. So just wanted to start there. And 12 years ago, when I first read Victor Vitanza's essay, Abandoned to Writing, I recognized the value of the more than 200 tildes that he used as a way of visually allegorizing the vast potential of writing and rhetoric that is suppressed by our rigid disciplinary lines of demarcation. It was 2003. Unbeknownst to me, the end of the personal computing era had already been announced. The PC era, epitomized by the graphical user interface, mouse, and screen, had peaked, and a new era of sensory-based, networked, increasingly mobile computing technologies represented the new cutting edge. Not long before Victor's essay was published, computer scientist and internet pioneer David Clark claimed that a post-PC era was on the rise. Not long after, Bill Gates described a PC plus era. In an op-ed for Newsweek, Steve Jobs spoke about a new era in which the PC would be a digital hub for a growing number of mobile devices. And self-described futurist Paul Sappho had written about a new age of analog, one in which an ever-widening range of smartifactual technologies were on the rise. In fact, in a presentation just last year, Sappho claimed that the past 50 years of digital computing has been little more than an interregnum between 2 analog orders. The new era, about which they all spoke well over a decade ago, and to this day is today really hard to ignore. And the cutting edge of creativity, this is a really important point here, the cutting edge of creativity and communication with which that new era engages is sensing and responding to a growing range of wave-like energy flows that include light, heat, touch, vibration, radio, motion, distance. For a special issue of Enculturation titled Rhetoric, Composition, Intersections, Impasses, Differends, Vitanza was invited by the editors to respond to the following question: what is the place of rhetoric and composition today? Considering how loaded that question is for scholars associated with a field that, depending on our training and institutional investments, is known affectionately as Rec Comp or Comp Ret, we should appreciate his counter move. Rather than answer the editor's question, which Vitanza implies would lead invariably to the kind of argumentative impasse epitomized by the 2 positions in the debate between the personal or creative writer Peter Elbow and the institutional or academic scholar David Bartholomew, Vitanza responds with a question of his own. What is it that writing wants? For Vitanza, the hostage in the never-ending negotiations of Rec Comp versus Comp Ret is a more expansive view of what writing can be. And I'd add to that rhetoric. In the following excerpt, Vitanza moves beyond the elbow-Bartholomew impasse by introducing what he calls a third wave forward. Perhaps there are two possibilities. We can start teaching writing precisely as the university needs it taught, or we can attempt to teach writing the way we want. But there are, let us not forget, third interval waves, and therefore we should ask, what is it that writing wants? I suspect that writing does not want what either the university thinks it needs or what we think we want. The two sides in the debate between Bartholomew and Elbow are apparent. Bartholomew advocates writing for the university, Elbow advocates for the individual writer. For Vitanza, these two positions are a hapless problem because a more expansive approach to what writing can be has been slashed away and ignored. Sometimes it takes a bystander, a third party, to ask the obvious question, why don't you just ask writing what it wants? Which is a position that Vitanza had realized in his own scholarly work on another subject, namely the sophists. So the tildes written throughout Victor's essay allegorize the irrepressible want or desire of writing, a desire that isn't ours to control, like the lines in the palm of your hand, the movements of pedestrians blindly scripting the meaning of their city with each step, or the wavelengths of energy writing themselves across air and other conductive material. Writing exceeds our demands. The question about the proper position of the slash perpetuates an unproductively limited view of writing and rhetoric. It's a wonderful essay to which I've returned numerous times. But when I returned to it recently while I was drafting this book on physical computing and its impact on our field, the tildes took on a new importance. Suddenly, the tildes were expressive of a problem directly related to the digital in our fields. They had become an implicit response to a new slashing of value in our work as digital rhetoricians and writers, the inadvertent separation of the digital from the analog. In the post-PC era of computing in which we find ourselves increasingly immersed, the digital and the analog are combined, folded together in ever new eversions of hybridized force. The analog and the digital are no longer separate and distinct as they were during the PC era. The line between reality and VR, which the personal computing era institutionalized, is giving way to a new era of computing in which realities are a mashup of the two, for which reason I characterize it as post-digital. To help make my point clear, let's take a quick look at Rainroom. It's a provocative example of an everted or hybrid space-time that epitomizes some of what's possible in the new era. And while it is characterized as art by its creators, it should be characterized as post-digital rhetoric. On Random International's website, which is the group, the consortium of artists who developed this project and others, Rainroom is described as follows. Rainroom is a 100 square meter field of falling water through which it's possible to walk without being drenched in the process. As you progress through the space, the sound of water and a suggestion of moisture fill the air. Before you are confronted by this carefully choreographed downpour that responds to your movements and presence. Now, this is what's happening. They have put together a series of depth cameras, not unlike the one that's here on this Connect. And they are mapping out the volumetric shapes in real time that are occupying some of that 100 meter square space. And then they are reconciling that those volumetric shapes with a two-dimensional grid of water spigots that are simulating rainfall above. And they're able to turn on and off those spigots in near real time and at such close proximity to the participants in the space that when you watch YouTube videos, Vimeo videos about the reactions, people are genuinely just kind of blown away by feeling like they are walking in a rainstorm without getting wet, okay? Now, there are several kinds of depth cameras on the market, so I'm gonna speculate a little bit about the exact technical aspects of their work, but I wanna get into that a little bit because to me, this is really what it's about rhetorically, figuring out how to make this kind of suasive environment. So time of flight depth cameras like the one that's on the Connect there will emit hundreds of thousands of infrared beams into the space. And the time that the light beams take to bounce back is the basis for calculating the thousands of microdistances of an object surface from the sensor. The depth cameras in rain room would then be used, as I said, to map the constantly changing volumetric shapes, human or non-human. Makes no difference. Now, the depth sensor is key, but a software program would have to be written to reconcile the depth data from the cameras with the two-dimensional grid of water spigots hanging from the false ceiling above. A three-dimensional shape in the space would have to be remapped to the two-dimensional grid overhead, and then scores of microcontrollers controlled by that software would be used to turn the water valves on and off in microseconds in order to simulate both rainfall, but especially to stop the rain when someone is occupying the space below. Now, the depth sensor, excuse me. As I said a few minutes earlier, in the new post-digital era of computing, the cutting edge of creativity and communication involves sensing and responding to a growing range of wave-like energy flows that include light, heat, vibration, radio, motion. In rain room, the depth cameras are the sensors. The software, the microcontrollers, and the simulated and controlled rainfall are the responses to those wave-like energy flows. The real-time data that the cameras receive about the surfaces of the humans and objects in the space, the basis for the hybrid reality or everted experience that's created. In the post-digital era of computing, to which rain room is a novel contribution, the basis of creativity is derived from what Dan O'Sullivan and Tom Igoe call the process of transduction. In their book titled Physical Computing, they explain that the new computational era is about, quote, creating a conversation between the physical world and the virtual world of the computer. And I just have to throw in, after thinking about Elmo and Bartholomew and the scholars of that era, you know, these guys sound a little bit like the Kenneth Bruffy of physical computing, you know. Okay, anyway. That was a lot funnier in my head. I thought you'd all get a kick out of that. So let's take a look at this quote here. The process of transduction, or the conversion of one form of energy into another, is what enables this flow. Your job is to find and learn to use transducers to convert between physical energy appropriate for your project and the electrical energy used by the computer. Now, I don't have a lot of time here. Okay, I definitely don't have a lot of time. I got enough time. But I want to say a little bit about just what's going on at that analog level. Sensors, like the tens of thousands of tiny light sensors in a single digital camera, have a small but continuous flow of electricity running across each and every one of them. When there's a change in the force of the energy wave that they are designed to sense, the voltage running across the sensor will go up or down. The constantly waxing and waning voltage reading is the analog value. It's the connection to the real world. Incidentally, that camera has no idea what light is beyond its energy wave. That's all it's picking up, okay? Since a digital computer cannot read analog values, it has to convert them into a digital form. And this is where an analog to digital converter is essential. Every PC is going to have it, for the keyboard, for the mouse, for any and all other sensors that are part of a traditional PC. You've got a digital to analog converter that's making that connection from voltage readings to zeros and ones, okay? Those numbers are the basis for transduction because everything in a digital computer is numerically represented, as Lev Manovich explains in the language of new media as one of his first or second principles. That range of numbers, which represents the amount of light or heat or vibration sensed by a sensor, can be used to do anything, to play a sound, to display various images in all different kinds of interesting ways, and or to create a conversion back to the analog in order to do something like Rain Room does within that everted space that they've created, okay? As rhetoricians, the new era of computing is one in which we develop transductive rhetorics, which are rhetorics that fold together the analog and the digital in new ways. And I want to thank Doug for this, because I got to throw this in the final revisions. I think I'm kind of a neo-Bitzerian, because, you know, Bitzer, that quote you have is awesome. So, you know, it's about altering reality, but then Bitzer's like, but it's not about energy. Yeah, it's about energy, okay. From the standpoint of a project like Rain Room, I'd say that rhetorically speaking, okay, and if I can just switch to say like, yeah, this is rhetoric. Let me just explain very briefly why. The transductive process, I'd say that rhetorically speaking, Rain Room participates in a transductive process that can be looked at rhetorically in a couple of ways. First, as a kind of epideictic appeal. And I'm thinking really specifically about the way in which Lawrence Rosenfield has theorized epideictic. So when we look at something like the practical celebration of epideictic, he writes, the term epideictic comes from epideixis, to shine or show forth, hence our translation of the word as display is only literally correct. More precisely, the word suggests an exhibiting or making apparent what might otherwise remain unnoticed or invisible. Of course, the being shown here is something computationally derived, so it's a bit complicated, but to me, what Rain Room does, what we do as digital rhetoricians or post-digital rhetoricians in these kinds of everted spaces is epideictic rhetoric, okay? Second, another way to think of Rain Room as rhetoric, it can be valued stylistically as a novel post-linguistic variation on schemes of omission. A gap is generated between skin and rain, and that gap generates a distance in which a kind of contemplative power can be experienced. There's an opportunity then to really think about rain in a way that you otherwise can't. So in addition to being an epideictic space, projects like this kind of computing era is all about style, I would argue. I mean, you're making style machines and having people inhabit them on some level. Circling back to Victor's essay, and in conclusion, 12 years after its publication during the waning days of the PC era, the tildes, in my mind now, are the analog flows of energy, the creative potential slashed away by the personal computing era in which most of our work has been practiced and theorized. And while Victor used the tildes to allegorize the irrepressible desire of writing, which writes through and across us, I enjoy thinking of the ways in which a new, irrepressible era of hybrid everted computing was writing itself through him, secretly baking itself into his argument. Who better than a scholar, frankly, of the third wave, trapped by little more than historic circumstance within a PC era, to channel, unbeknownst to him, the new wave-like age of analog, slashed away at that moment by the limits of PC computing, but irrepressibly communicating itself through him and his words. The third wave, about which Vitanza wrote, reads like a secret manifesto about the third post-digital era of computing into which we find ourselves. Moreover, his argument against the use of slashes can be reread as a call to move past the exclusive focus on the digital in order to engage with the analog waves of writerly and rhetorical force so that we can make that important turn toward the transductive. Thank you.